The samurai's sword never trembles, not because he's stronger than you, but because he learned something nobody ever told you. The real battle doesn't happen out there. While you wake up exhausted, drag your body to the coffee maker and already feel the weight of the day crushing your shoulders, there's a secret hidden in the mountains of Japan that turns productivity into something almost meditative. No motivational screaming, no endless lists, no feeling like you're always chasing your own tail. The West sold us the idea that success hurts, that you need to bleed, lose sleep, sacrifice everything. But what if I told you there's a way to reach your goals without feeling like you're being ground down from the inside? A philosophy so simple it seems impossible to work, until you try it and realize you've been fighting against the tide your entire life. Get ready. What comes next isn't just another trendy technique. It's a shift in perspective that Japanese warriors perfected centuries ago, and it works today, in the chaos of your routine, just as it worked on the battlefields. There's a rock in Kyoto, smooth as glass, shaped by nothing but water falling on the same spot for 300 years. Not a hammer, not a chisel, just drops, one after another. Patient, relentless. This is how the samurai understood progress, and it's the opposite of everything you've been taught about getting things done. We live in a world obsessed with explosions, big launches, massive transformations, overnight success stories that make you feel like a failure because you're still stuck in the same place you were last month. But here's the truth, nobody wants to admit. Those stories are lies, or at least they're incomplete. What you don't see is the 1,000 tiny drops that came before the flood. The Japanese call this approach Mizu no Kokoro, mind like water. It doesn't mean being passive or weak. It means understanding that real power accumulates slowly, almost invisibly, until one day you turn around and realize the mountain has moved. Think about learning a language. The first week feels like drowning. The second week, you remember 5 words. By month 6, you're thinking in sentences without trying. You didn't notice the exact moment it clicked because there was no single moment. There were 10,000 drops. This principle destroys the myth of willpower. You've been told you need iron discipline, that you have to force yourself through pain every single day. But force creates resistance. Push water, and it splashes back. The samurai knew that consistency beats intensity every time. Not because it's easier. It's actually harder to show up when nothing feels like it's changing. But it works because you're not fighting yourself. You're flowing. Here's where it gets practical. Take whatever goal is haunting you right now. The one that feels too big, too far away. Break it down until it becomes laughably small. Want to write a book? Forget the book. Write 50 words before breakfast. Want to get in shape? Forget the six-pack. Do 5 push-ups when you brush your teeth. The size doesn't matter. The drop doesn't care about its own weight. It just falls. Your brain will resist this. It wants the drama of big commitments and visible results. It wants to feel like a hero. But the persistent drop doesn't need applause. It doesn't need motivation. It just needs to happen. And when you remove the pressure of being impressive, something strange occurs. You actually start enjoying the process. The weight lifts. The dread disappears. You stop checking the mirror every day waiting for transformation because you're too busy living inside the rhythm. Most people quit, not because they're lazy, but because they're exhausted from pretending to be someone they're not. They set goals that require a different personality, then blame themselves when it doesn't stick. The persistent drop works because it accepts who you are right now, in this moment, with all your limitations and distractions. It doesn't ask you to become a monk or a machine. It just asks you to fall. Once, then again tomorrow. This is the foundation. Everything else we're about to explore builds on this single truth. Small, repeated actions create massive change without the suffering you've come to expect. The samurai won battles because they practiced the same sword stroke 10,000 times. Not because each stroke was perfect, because the repetition itself became the victory. Now that you understand the power of the drop, let's talk about what stops most people from even starting. It's not laziness. It's not lack of time. It's something the Japanese identified centuries ago and built an entire philosophy around defeating. the terror of imperfection. Kaizen translates roughly to continuous improvement, but that definition misses the soul of it. At its core, Kaizen is permission to be terrible, to start messy, to build something that would embarrass you if anyone saw it. Western culture treats this as failure. Japanese culture treats it as the only honest way to grow. Picture a master swordsmith. He doesn't wake up one morning and forge a legendary blade. He makes 100 swords that break, bend, or look like garbage. Each one teaches him something the books never could. The metal whispers its secrets through failure. But here's the shift. He doesn't see those broken swords as mistakes. They're steps, necessary, even beautiful in their own way because they lead somewhere real. You've been paralyzed by the gap between where you are and where you want to be. That gap looks like an ocean. Kaizen hands you a single brick and says, lay it down. Tomorrow, lay another. The bridge builds itself if you stop trying to see the other side before you start. This sounds simple until you realize how deeply we've been programmed to fear small beginnings. There's a reason corporations adopted Kaizen after World War II. Japanese factories were destroyed. They had nothing, no choice but to improve one tiny piece at a time. What emerged wasn't just efficiency. It was a mindset that removed the emotional weight from progress. You don't need to be inspired to improve by 1%. You don't need courage to adjust a single variable. You just need to show up and tweak something. Apply this to your life right now. Look at your morning routine. Don't overhaul it. Don't promise yourself you'll wake up at 4 in the morning and meditate for an hour. Just move one thing 2 minutes earlier. That's it. Next week, adjust something else. The improvements compound so slowly you won't notice them day to day. But check back in 3 months and you'll be living inside a different rhythm entirely, without ever having suffered through a dramatic transformation. The silent part of this weapon is crucial. Kaizen doesn't announce itself. It doesn't post on social media about the journey. It works in the dark, under the surface, where nobody's watching and judging. This is liberating. You're not performing progress for an audience. You're not maintaining an image. You're just fixing what's in front of you, one small thing at a time, and that privacy protects you from burnout. Most productivity advice asks you to become someone else. Kaizen asks you to become a slightly better version of who you already are. It respects your limits. It doesn't shame you for being human. And paradoxically, this gentle approach creates more change than any aggressive overhaul ever could, because you can sustain it. There's no rebellion, no collapse. Just steady, quiet improvement that never stops. This connects directly back to the persistent drop. You're not just repeating the same action, you're refining it. Each drop falls a little more precisely than the last, not because you're forcing perfection, but because you're paying attention. And attention, applied consistently over time, is the most powerful force available to ordinary people like us. Everything we've discussed so far involves action. Drops falling, improvements stacking. But here's where Japanese philosophy diverges sharply from Western hustle culture, and where most people completely miss the point. The space between the notes matters more than the notes themselves. Ma is the untranslatable concept that changed how samurai fought, how artists created, and how monks found peace. It's the pause, the breath, the silence that gives meaning to the sound. In practical terms, it's the reason you're burned out even when you're being productive. You've eliminated all the amma from your life, and now everything blurs into noise. Watch a traditional tea ceremony. Every movement is deliberate, but what strikes you isn't the action, it's the stillness surrounding it. The practitioner pours water, then waits. Not because something's cooking, because the wait itself is part of the experience. It creates space for awareness, for presence, for the mind to process what just happened before rushing toward what comes next. Your calendar has no ma, back-to-back meetings, tasks bleeding into each other. Even your leisure time is scheduled, optimized, turned into another form of productivity. You finish one thing and immediately grab the next because stopping feels like losing. But the samurai knew something you've forgotten. Power accumulates in emptiness. Think about a sword strike. It's not the swing that kills, it's the readiness before the swing. That fraction of a second where the warrior is completely still, completely aware, completely available to respond to whatever comes. If he's already moving, he's committed. He's lost his ma, and with it, his advantage. The same applies to your decisions, your creativity, your ability to actually think instead of just react. Here's how this shows up in daily life. You finish a work task and immediately check your phone. Scroll, fill the void. Why? Because we've been trained to fear emptiness, to treat silence as waste. But that's exactly when your brain processes information, makes connections, solves problems you didn't even know you were working on. By eliminating Ma, you're eliminating the space where insight lives. The practical application is almost offensive in its simplicity. Do nothing, on purpose, for 5 minutes. Not meditation, not a productivity hack. Just sit there and let your mind wander without a phone, without input, without agenda. Most people can't last 90 seconds before the panic sets in. That panic is showing you how far you've drifted from your own rhythm. Ma also appears in conversation. Notice how uncomfortable silence makes people. They rush to fill it, say anything, even if it's meaningless. But the best communicators know that pausing after someone speaks, really pausing, letting the words settle, creates depth. It shows respect. It allows truth to emerge instead of just reaction. The samurai applied this in combat. He who strikes first often loses because he reveals his intention too early. He who waits, who holds the ma, controls the encounter. By the way, if you want to go deeper and turn discipline into a way of life, check out the KMA method. It's a concise, practical guide designed to sharpen your mind, strengthen your will, and build unbreakable consistency in just 5 minutes a day. The link is in the first pinned comment below. This isn't about doing less. It's about creating breathing room around what you do so it actually matters. Think of your tasks as islands. Right now they're connected by rickety bridges you're sprinting across without stopping. Ma suggests you put space between the islands. Let them exist separately. When you move from one to the next, you arrive fresh, instead of dragging the previous island with you. The connection to Kaizen is subtle but vital. Continuous improvement requires observation. Observation requires space. If you're always moving, you can't see what needs adjusting. Ma gives you the distance to notice patterns, to feel what's working and what's draining you. It's the invisible ingredient that makes everything else sustainable. All the techniques mean nothing if you're climbing the wrong mountain. The drops keep falling, the improvements keep stacking, the pauses create space. But for what? This is where Ikigai enters, and where most Western interpretations completely butcher the concept by turning it into another productivity framework. Ikigai isn't your passion. It's not your purpose in some grand cosmic sense. It's much quieter than that, much more personal. The word breaks down into iki, meaning life, and gai, meaning value or worth. It's the reason you get out of bed, that has nothing to do with money or status or proving anything to anyone. For some, it's tending a garden. For others, it's making their grandmother laugh. It's not impressive. It's not Instagram-worthy. But it's real. The samurai understood this deeply. Yes, they trained for battle. Yes, they served their lord. But their ikigai often lived in small private rituals, arranging flowers, writing poetry, practicing calligraphy until their hand moved like water. These weren't hobbies or stress relief. They were anchors, ways of staying human when everything around them was violence and chaos. Without ikigai, a warrior became a weapon. With it, he remained a person wielding a weapon. The difference is everything. Here's why this matters for you right now. You've been told to find your passion and monetize it, to turn everything you love into a side hustle, to optimize every moment for maximum output. This approach destroys ikigai because it puts conditions on your worth. You start measuring your value by external metrics, followers, income, recognition, and suddenly the things that used to bring you peace become sources of anxiety. Ikigai asks a different question. Not, what can I do that the world will pay me for? But what makes me feel alive without needing anyone's permission or approval? The answer is usually embarrassingly simple. Maybe you feel most alive when you're cooking a meal for nobody but yourself. Maybe it's walking the same route every morning and noticing how the light changes. Maybe it's solving crossword puzzles in pen. These things don't scale. They don't build empires. They just make life worth living. The internal map part is crucial. Samurai trained extensively in external navigation, reading terrain, anticipating enemy movements, finding water sources. But they spent equal time on internal navigation, knowing their own mind, understanding their triggers, their limits, their sources of strength. Ikigai is the North Star of that internal map. When you know what genuinely matters to you, decisions become simpler, not easier, but clearer. Right now, you're probably navigating by someone else's map, society's map, your parents' map, the map drawn by people who succeeded in a world that no longer exists. That's why you feel lost even when you're moving forward. You're making progress toward a destination you never actually chose. Ikigai forces you to stop and ask, where am I actually trying to go? And just as importantly, why? This connects back to Ma because finding your Ikigai requires space. You can't hear your own voice when everyone else is shouting directions at you. You need silence, stillness, permission to disappoint people while you figure out what actually lights you up inside. Most people never grant themselves this permission. They spend their entire lives being productive in service of goals they inherited rather than chose. The beautiful thing about Ikigai is that it doesn't need to be big. In fact, it works better when it's small. A grand purpose feels like pressure. A small daily practice feels like home. And when you have that anchor, everything else, the drops, the improvements, the pauses, begins to organize itself around something real. You're not just being productive anymore. You're building a life that doesn't require recovery time because it's not exhausting you in the first place. We've arrived at the final piece, and it's the one that ties everything together while simultaneously undoing everything modern culture taught you about success. Wabi-sabi is the acceptance of impermanence and imperfection as not just inevitable, but beautiful. It's the crack in the pottery that makes it valuable. The worn floor of a temple that speaks of centuries of footsteps. It's the opposite of Instagram perfection, and it's the reason you'll actually finish what you start. The samurai lived with death hanging over every moment. They knew their time was limited. They knew their bodies would fail. They knew the cherry blossoms would fall before they finished admiring them. And instead of fighting this reality or pretending it wasn't there, they let it inform everything. A sword with nicks in the blade wasn't ruined. It was marked by experience. A warrior with scars wasn't damaged. He was proven. You've been trying to create a perfect system, perfect habits, perfect discipline, a version of yourself that never falters or feels tired or makes stupid mistakes. This fantasy is killing your progress because perfection is a finish line that doesn't exist. Every time you slip, every time you miss a day or eat the wrong thing or waste an afternoon, you treat it as evidence that you're not cut out for this. Wabi-sabi says that slip is part of the pattern. The imperfection is the point. Look at your persistent drops. Some will fall crooked. Some will miss entirely. That's not failure. That's reality asserting itself, reminding you that you're human and not a machine. The question isn't how to eliminate the crooked drops. The question is, can you keep going anyway, without shame, without drama, accepting that messy progress is still progress? This philosophy demolishes perfectionism, which is really just fear wearing a mask of high standards. Perfectionism whispers that if you can't do it right, don't do it at all. Wabi-sabi responds, there is no right. There's only done and not done, and done even badly teaches you something. Not done teaches you nothing except how to quit. Kaizen improves things, but Wabi-sabi accepts that even improved things will crack and fade and need improving again. There's no final form, no destination where you arrive and get to stop. Life is constant decay and renewal happening simultaneously, and peace comes from dancing with that rhythm instead of resisting it. The garden grows, the garden dies. You plant again. This is the cycle. Fighting it makes you miserable. Accepting it makes you free. Your empty spaces, will sometimes feel unproductive. You'll sit in silence and your mind will wander to stupid things instead of profound insights. Wabi Sabi says, that's fine. The space doesn't have to perform, it just has to exist. Some pauses will be transformative, others will be boring. Both are necessary. Your ikigai will shift and evolve. What lights you up at 20 might bore you at 40. What felt meaningful last year might feel empty now. Wabi Sabi doesn't demand loyalty to a fixed purpose. It asks you to remain honest about what's true today, knowing tomorrow might bring something different. The samurai's internal map was drawn in sand, not stone, for exactly this reason. Here's the permission you've been waiting for. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to be consistent every single day. You don't have to optimize every moment or eliminate every flaw. You just have to keep showing up, keep dropping, keep adjusting, keep pausing, keep checking your map, and keep forgiving yourself when the path gets messy. Because it will get messy. That's the guarantee. The Western mind hears this and thinks it's an excuse for mediocrity. But Wabi Sabi produces results precisely because it removes the emotional weight that causes most people to quit. When you accept imperfection, you stop spending energy on shame and self-criticism. That energy goes back into the work. You move faster because you're not constantly stopping to judge yourself. You experiment more because failure isn't catastrophic. It's information. This is how the method makes you productive without stress or overwhelm. Not by doing more. Not by being better, by accepting the truth of what you are, human, limited, imperfect, temporary, and building your systems around that truth instead of around some fantasy version of yourself that doesn't exist. The samurai's sword was deadly not because it was flawless, but because it was wielded by someone who had made peace with his own mortality. That peace became focus. That focus became power. And that power changed history. One imperfect swing at a time.